Good morning. It is a good morning. If you woke up early this morning, it was raining, and now we have beautiful sunshine. And I hope we're going to have some time today to spend with the Word. Last Sunday, Stephen came to us from Malachi, and he kind of inspired my thoughts this week. It's not uncommon. I like that I get to sometime hear someone else speak besides myself. I'm sure Tracy would like that too, but that's another story for another time. He said a passage last week. He read a passage last week from Malachi that just kind of made me think. And so it was this passage here. And let's kind of look at it for just a moment. Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. Even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. What I centered in on this week was will suddenly come to his temple. And I started thinking about Jesus at the temple. If you're visiting with us today, we're glad you are here. Whether that be here in the auditorium or in our fellowship hall by video, I have a feeling we probably have a few people that's still pretty under our pavilion. I know we've got some folks in our parking lot. I've got a handout for you. It should have been there in your pew, or hopefully you got one from somebody when you were getting your bulletin today so that you can follow along and be a part of our lesson and maybe take that lesson because there's some things I'm going to let you look at on your own this week. We're going to look at Jesus at the temple. And while we read from Luke chapter 2, we're going to be in John chapter 8. Will you join us in John chapter 8 today as we open God's Word? You know, most of us know a story of Jesus at the temple. And I think the story that a lot of us think about is when he's a young boy. And he's left behind by his parents. And they have to go back and find him. And he's with all the learned people of his day. And he's answering all the great questions. And he says, you know, this is where I should be. I'm in my Father's house. Or maybe if I asked, tell me a story about Jesus at the temple, you might have said, oh, I remember he got angry once. They had made his Father's house into a money changer's place. And I remember a story about him overturning tables. The story I'm going to talk about today is one that is familiar to you. It's not a news story for many of you who have been Bible students or those who are looking to be better, but it has maybe surprised you where it happened. I think sometimes we don't always look at the setting of the story in the Bible. We like the story, we like the lesson that we get, but we may not realize where it happened. And so today, I want us to see where this story happened. John chapter 8, Jesus faces a self-righteous challenge. And I want us to look at the account. We're going to look at the first 12 verses of John chapter 8, and I want you to see the account that Jesus gives. First, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. You know, oftentimes we hear about this Mount of Olives. I wanted to put a picture for you up here so that you could see. One of the reasons Jesus would go there is he can see the city of Jerusalem before him. He can see the people. He can see the streets. Maybe you've got a special place that you like to pull over. Maybe it's in Gatlinburg or on the way to Pigeon Forge, one of those overlooks where you can just see for a long ways off. The Mount of Olives is one of the hills that Jerusalem is built on. And you can be on it and you can see Jerusalem and you can see the temple. It's right across the brook of Kidron. And you can go out there and as Jesus prayed and as he looked down on his people, that's what he could see. But notice in the next verse, now early in the morning he came again into the temple. Jesus often visited the temple. What does Malachi tell us? He's going to be there, right? He's going to be there in the temple. And that had to be a surreal experience for him because the temple was where people came to worship the Father, and yet the Son was right there in the complex. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. I wanted you to picture the temple this morning. And if you're following along with our slides, they're available online at www.oldunioncoc.com, and you can get those. I hope a lot of you use those to get our songs today. But I put a picture of the temple complex. I wanted you to see when it says Jesus goes to the temple, he doesn't go inside the temple. Today, some of you, and we say the word, have come to church, and I understand the church are the people. We've come to a building. We've assembled together. Jesus never went in the temple. The temple was where the priests went. There was the Holy of Holies. The high priest went once a year. When it says Jesus went into the temple, he went to the temple complex. And so think about today, Old Union as a complex. We've got some people in the parking lot, right? We've got some people in the pavilion. We've got some people in the fellowship hall. We've got some people assembled in here. We kind of have a complex, a campus, a community here. Well, that's what the temple was. And when it says Jesus was teaching in the temple, most likely he's teaching in one of those courtyards, maybe one of those porches or porticos that you see on the edge. This is a huge complex. Don't picture Jesus walking in and standing in front of a group of people like me today with the Holy of Holies behind. That's not where he taught. He taught in the shadow of the temple. And so the people gathered there to have Bible class. And Jesus had been teaching at times when he was 12 there, and now that he has started his ministry, he finds himself once again at that temple. And who he's going to meet that day are the accusers. So we have the place. Let's look at what's happening here. And let's look at what is being accused. Guys, I've taught a lot of Bible classes in my time. I've been blessed. I've never had a Bible class interrupted for this reason. Now, I've had Bible classes interrupted. Power has gone out. Someone has gotten ill. A baby is crying. The audience was asleep. You know, things like that, right? I've had classes be interrupted before. Many times I'm teaching at school. And man, I am teaching my heart out. And a kid will raise their hand, and I'm thinking he is or she is about to ask the greatest history question. I have really made them think, and I'll call on them, and I'll say something like, yes, Seth, what do you want? Can I go to the bathroom? Right? I've been interrupted lots of times, but never in the way that Jesus. So picture Jesus in the shadow of the temple, teaching a Bible class, and there's a ruckus. And some people drag a woman before him. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, they've interrupted his class. Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery, in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? You ever been put on the spot? Someone ever asks you a question that just, and again, sometimes that happens in class when I'm teaching, someone will have a question, and I'm like, ooh, you know, that's a hard one. I'm going to have to back up a little bit. Well, let's back up a little bit and examine who these folks are who brought this woman. They are Pharisees. Now, you may remember the little children's song, I don't want to be a Pharisee because they're not fair, you see, right? Well, let's look at who these people are. Who are these accusers? Who are these people who found this woman and thought it important enough to interrupt Jesus and to ask him a question? Well, the Pharisees are the separated ones. They are the ones who do not like Greek and Roman rule. Now, you need to keep that in the back of your head. It's ironic because they'll use Greek and Roman rule later to put Jesus on the cross because they can't kill him, but the Roman government can. And he goes from a charge of blasphemy, if you remember, to a charge of king of the Jews. Well, they are separated. They believe in hell and angels and demons. They believe in a bodily resurrection, which is interesting because Jesus will be resurrected. And they believe a Messiah is coming. And there they are in his Bible class, and they're more concerned right now about what he would do with this woman. Now, don't confuse them with the Sadducees. I've got a passage there on the slide. The Sadducees are kind of the opposite. They don't believe in a resurrection. They don't believe in angels. They don't believe in the Spirit. But the Pharisees believe in all of those things. And so they have drugged this lady before Jesus. Well, why have they done that? They have done that because she has broken the law. And they are keepers of the law. Some of you are keepers of the law. There's just certain things that have to be, right? We have Thanksgiving coming up. You got Thanksgiving coming up? And I hope this year we can find the things to be what? Thankful for. If every year we needed Thanksgiving, it's this year. They are keepers of the law. And there are certain laws, right? And some of them are unwritten. Like, what are you going to have for Thanksgiving? Turkey or ham? Well, if I had a survey here, some of you may say, well, I don't like turkey. We're going to have ham. And I would say, ham for Thanksgiving? Some of you say, I'm going to have Spam. Okay, we're just going to be somewhere in the middle. I don't know. Guys, they're just these laws, right? They're not really written anywhere, right? I mean, if you don't have turkey for Thanksgiving, I'm sure it's not the end of the world. And I know some of you are writing that down right now and say, I'm going to show that to Aunt Gladys as soon as church is over, right? that it's okay. They believed a lot in oral tradition. They believed a lot in oral tradition. And so these people who come to accuse, sorry, I got ahead of myself there. They believe not only in the written tradition, but in the oral tradition. Some of us like the tradition. And it often saddens us at Thanksgiving when we gather around that table and maybe a certain food item is not there anymore because the person who traditionally made that is not with us anymore. Well, let's look at the accused. Who have they brought before Jesus? Well, they have brought a woman. They have brought a woman into the temple complex. Well, that's okay. There were parts of the temple complex that allowed women to go in. Women could not go in the temple, but they could come into the temple complex. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, so they had brought a woman who was in the middle of something else in her morning or afternoon or day, and she has been grabbed up by a crowd and dragged through the streets, marched into the temple, and thrown at the foot of a teacher. I want you to imagine that I'm teaching right now and somebody comes in from the parking lot and they're dragging someone with them and they throw them down here in front of me and say, "What are you going to do about that?" Whoa. Right? Whoa. Now remember, Jesus is teaching a class. There is an audience to this. And the Pharisees, I think, bring it because there is an audience. They want Jesus to have to answer some hard questions in front of his class so that they can then later accuse him of things. Well, what is the accusation? What is the accusation? Well, the accusation is what? She has been caught in adultery. As a matter of fact, they said, she has been caught in adultery. Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act. Now, I want to back up for just a moment, and I don't want to get too specific here, but it takes two. It takes two. Guys, sin is often not done just privately, and sometimes we encourage someone else to do it with us because that makes it okay. That makes it okay, right? If somebody said, "Oh, come on, it's not that big of a deal." But they only bring her, and I don't know the story of that. I don't know if there was entrapment. I don't know if they caught her with a Pharisee, and they knew him and didn't want to drag him into this, right? But they have brought her, and they ask a question, and here's the accusation. Now, Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? Now, let me set the scene for you here. Have you ever been painted into a corner? Maybe literally, but maybe in a question. Someone was leading you down the line, a question. Philip, I know you're an attorney, and there have probably been times that they have painted or you have painted someone into because you need an answer. Well, that's what they're doing to Jesus here. There are two choices here for Jesus in their mind. Either Jesus says, yes, she violated the law of Moses, and we must kill her. Okay, good. But if you stone her, Jesus, you have violated Roman law, because Roman law said Jews no longer had the authority to kill. It had to be the civil government who did that. And so if Jesus encourages stoning, they're going to run to the Roman officials who they don't even like. Pharisees don't like Roman rule. And say, hey, there's someone in the temple encouraging that they can take the law into their own hands? But if Jesus says, it's not that big of a deal, let her go, they're going to turn to the Bible class and they go, how dare you have this teacher who teaches you things that are not in the law of Moses? Can you believe he did that? Guys, they thought they had Jesus painted into a corner. But Jesus wasn't painted into a corner. As a matter of fact, here's what he does. Look at the text, will you, in John chapter 8. This they said to him, testing him. They don't really care about her. Let me just be honest. We have a lot of debates in our country about politics or about religion or the history community. And a lot of times we're just wanting to have a debate. They're just wanting to test, that they might test him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. They're really not concerned about her, let's be honest. That she is just the thing to get the conversation started. You ever walked into a conversation and someone said, oh, there's someone, hey, come here, you know what I mean. And you're thinking, I just walked into this conversation, right? Or anyone ever said, you know what, we ought to do yard work. And you go, who's we in that conversation, right? Well, that's kind of what's happened here. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. Any of you ask someone a question and they just looked at you? Well, that's kind of what Jesus does here. There's been much debate and much conjecture about this idea of writing on the ground. I think Jesus was giving some time. Now remember, he's in class. The same as if it were happening right here before your eyes, those of you in the building. And I hope those of you outside or on video can picture this. And everyone's looking at Jesus. How's he going to respond? And he starts writing in the dirt. Do you remember who brought this woman? Scribes and Pharisees. You know what they can do that maybe his class can't? Read. Did you ever think about that? Probably most of the people Jesus was speaking to did not read. But the scribes and the Pharisees read. I don't know what Jesus wrote in that ground. I don't know if Jesus wrote their sins in the dirt. I don't know if he wrote, and I was just thinking this week, and this is total conjecture, and I don't write Bible, I'll let God do that through inspiration. Maybe he wrote, when a hand once wrote on a wall in the Old Testament, Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. You have been weighed in the balances, and you have been found wanting. I wondered about that. Is that what he wrote? I don't know what he wrote. He didn't write a passage and a chapter and a verse, because we do that later, right? Stephen, maybe he wrote in Hebrew, grace. I don't know what he wrote. But he has an answer. Have you noticed that yet? He's taking a moment. And then he's going to give the answer. And are you ready for the answer? They are. That's the whole reason they're there. So when they continued asking him, notice that? It didn't stop. So come on. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? You ever had somebody just pester you? Anybody ever come to you and say, hey, I need to ask you something, but I don't need an answer right away, but they send you 6 emails and a text message? Yeah, they don't need it right away. And they continued asking him. He raised himself up. So what do you think happened? The class got quiet. The Pharisees got quiet. They stopped asking. So he raised himself up and said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. Notice he didn't quote from the law of Moses, and he could have, Deuteronomy 20, about adultery and being caught and what's supposed to happen. Leviticus 20, I'm sorry. He didn't say, yes, let's take this woman out and kill her. And I have a feeling the Pharisees wouldn't even stayed around. They would have immediately ran and gotten the Roman guards. I didn't point it out in that temple complex picture, but in the corner of the temple complex is a tower, Fortress Antonio, where the Romans built it so they could see inside. See, they couldn't go in the temple. The Romans, there was a court of Gentiles, but they don't want to go in there. They could actually see over the wall and see what's going on. And you can imagine the Pharisees waving at the temple, the tower, and saying, hey, get down here. Arrest this guy. He's causing problems. Jesus stands up and says, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Would you like to have been at that scene as I have described it? Where were your eyes? Are your eyes on the woman? Are your eyes on the Pharisees? Are your eyes back on Jesus as he plays in the dirt? I wonder if as he played in that dirt, he thought, my Father made man from this stuff. You ever think about that? My Father made man from this stuff. And here they are, bringing a woman who's dirty before me in the shadow of the temple with accusations. Verse 9, will you join me there? Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. Wow. The oldest to the youngest. Those of us who are older, we understand the value of God's forgiveness. We also know what we have done that meant we needed it. Whether you're a new Christian, whether you're an old Christian, and I don't know if there's such a thing as an old Christian because we live forever, we're eternal. But whether you have been walking the journey for a while or whether you're new to walking the journey, we realize just what it is Jesus said there. You see, as they stood in the shadow of the temple, they realized in that building right beside them were offerings being made for forgiveness. Are you with me, church? None of you brought bulls and goats today. I don't think, Mark, you would be the one that I would think of, right? No bulls and goats today. But they are standing in the courtyard of a place set up for forgiveness. And they have brought a woman not so that she could be right, but so they could be right and Jesus be wrong. Why are you here this morning? Why are you here in the shadow of a cross? Did you bring stones in your pockets this morning? And there's probably some kid out there going, we can do that? Right? That's exciting. But how many of us today brought stones in our pockets this morning? Ready to toss as soon as we see that person, those people, someone break our oral tradition. Is that why you came? In the shadow of the cross? Instead of worrying whether someone could get forgiveness, you wanted to be the accuser? You think it's your job to drag them in front of Jesus and to hold them down and say, Jesus, what are you going to do about that? Well, let's see what Jesus does about that. Go back to verse 9. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Now, I think we read that as if it's just her and Jesus. I think the class is still there, wouldn't you be? Remember, you didn't come to stone her. It's the Pharisees and the scribes that showed up to stone her. You are still watching this as a crowd. And now the Pharisees have slowly trickled away, and Jesus is still just riding in the dirt. And now it's just Jesus. And have you ever thought about this? Can I tell you something that I hadn't thought about till this week? I don't know what the woman is doing. I don't know if they have thrown her down on the ground. I wonder, did Jesus get on the ground and write so he could look in her eyes and be on her level? Guys, you realize Jesus came down to be on this earth so that he could be on our level? You ever get down and get on the same level as a child? I could do that today, but I don't think I'd get back up. But Jesus, maybe that's why he's there. Verse 10, are you with me in the passage? When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman. Guys, he hasn't been concerned about what everybody else has been doing. He said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? And for the first time, we're already in verse 11, she gets to speak. She gets to speak. Are you with me? She said, No one, Lord. Now, the word Lord there isn't just acknowledging him possibly as God or special. It's actually teacher. The word there is teacher. No one, teacher. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Church, let's stop there for a moment. She is in the shadow of a building of forgiveness. She is standing in front of someone who could have said, I've never sinned. I've never sinned. If anybody can throw a rock here, it's me, Jesus the Christ, the Messiah you Pharisees have been looking for. But Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Guys, if there was anyone there who could have said something in a condemnation way, it's Jesus. Can I take you into the story in a more personal way this morning? You ever try to see yourself in the story? You ever read a Bible story and try to think, what if I were Moses and I saw a burning bush? What if I were Abraham and God told me to move? Well, what if, guys, in this story, you're only one of two people. You're either a Pharisee or the woman. because none of us are Jesus. Amen? You're either the Pharisee or the woman as you come in this morning. Now notice, Jesus does not say, oh, it's okay, go on your way. Or, oh, those mean people to you. I want you to read what he said again. Neither do I condemn you. And then he gives her the ability to change her life. Go and sin no more. What had she done? She had broken the law. But the law also said in Deuteronomy 17 that if someone was going to be put to death, there had to be 2 or 3 witnesses. Do you remember the beginning of the conversation? We caught her in the very act. I don't know who we was. I don't know how many of them saw or didn't see her as they marched through town and they said, what's going on? I said, oh, come on, this is going to be good. Let's go watch. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of one witness. Guys, there were no witnesses. Jesus stayed within the law. Jesus wasn't painted into a corner. He didn't answer according to Roman law. He answered according to God's law. The hands of the witnesses shall be first against him. If you believe someone was worthy of death, you had to throw the first stone. Are you with me, church? If you believe that this person did what they did, it was you who must cast the first stone. So you better be able to do it without a guilty conscience. You better be doing it because you're not testing Jesus, but because you're concerned about sin in the camp. And you better not do it if it's gossip, because you've got to be a witness. Did you hear me? Not because of what you heard, but because of what you saw. The hands of the witnesses shall be first against him and put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people, so shall put away the evil thing from among you. Guys, here's what I want us to close with today, and I want us to think about as we look at that. Jesus forgave a sinner who repents. Do you think her life was different? You know, the Bible never talks about her again. There are just times there that I wish the Bible told us more. Don't you want to know what she did the next day? Don't you want to know what she did when she passed in the streets and saw one of those Pharisees who had dragged her down there? Now, guys, that's the test. Go and sin no more. She may have never been interested in adultery again. I don't know the story. But that wasn't the only way she could sin. He faced the Pharisees. He forgave the fallen. Jesus responds with grace and mercy for her and conviction for her accusers. I told you I wanted to challenge you this morning. We're not going to read everything I'm about to put on the slide. It's on the handout. It's on the handout. But I want you to think for a moment about what we do with those caught in the act. I've given you some scriptures there for you to look up, from Mark, from Proverbs, from 1 Timothy, from 2 Corinthians. Don't get caught up in reading that right now. Listen. You can read that another time, and that's part of your private Bible study. Guys, Jesus came for forgiveness' sake, not judgment. And I need us to hear that in our world today. I need us to remind ourselves why we're here this morning. We're not here so we can stand on a pedestal and say, look how good I am. We're here to stand in the shadow of a cross and understand we may not be worthy to be here, but God thought us so. That God thought us so. Guys, it wasn't the temple in the shadow of a building that was built for forgiveness that forgave her. It was the Son of God. And do you realize he was going to go and die on a cross for that sin she had committed? If anyone could have been mad at her, if anyone could have said, woman, do you know the pain that you're about to cause me? It could have been Jesus. But he doesn't say that. Jesus came for forgiveness' sake, not judgment. And guys, it is obedience that will be the sifter. I don't know what that woman did afterwards, but I have a feeling her encounter with Jesus changed her life. It changed her life. I have a feeling it changed that Bible class's life. I don't know that it changed many of the Pharisees' life. This morning, if you brought rocks in, will you leave them in the pew? If you brought something in today because you're mad at somebody, because somebody, some of you even now say, I know somebody needs to hear that lesson. Get your rock out of your purse. It's too heavy to carry. Get your rocks out of your pockets. It's too heavy to carry. And in the shadow of a cross, let's not think about who needs to be sitting at the foot of it or being tossed at the bottom of it or praying at it. Let's think about ourselves for a moment. Because, guys, the real thing of whether we believe in forgiveness is how we live our life. That's how we will be judged. God is never going to ask any of us to come join him on the throne and say, will you help me out with this group? I don't think I know how to deal with them. The last verse is John chapter 8, verse 12. Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. The class is still there. Have you noticed? When it says he spoke to them, the Pharisees are gone. I don't know if the woman stayed for class. Would any of us have gone and gotten her a folding chair if all the ones were full? Or we would say, boy, that was awkward. I hope she just kind of gets out of here. Did she stay? Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Ladies and gentlemen, what is it Jesus needs to write in the sand today for you to wake up? For you to know what it is that you need forgiveness for. Now, I know you can tell me about somebody else who needs forgiveness. I know you can tell me about ways you have been wronged. I know you can tell me about other people who needed to hear this lesson. But guys, you're either the woman or the Pharisee this morning. And you'll decide that in just a moment when we sing together. I close with this story. I close with the story of a woman who had maybe gone past her graceful age. She was an English noblewoman, and a painter had come to paint her. And as she walked in, and the painter had his canvas there with his supplies, she walked in, and with her high horse she said, Sir, I hope this painting will do me justice. And he said, Madam, for you I'm going to paint with grace and mercy. How about it this morning? Are you concerned about justice? I am. There are things I'm concerned about. But today I'm concerned about grace and mercy because it has been given to me. We will celebrate it in a moment as a family. But there may be someone here today who needs it. We ask you to come during this song, and not to come down front so you can be accused, but to come down front so you can be unburdened and that you can be loved. If that's your calling, we're ready for you as we stand and as we sing.